This story is dedicated to every soul who has loved deeply, lost painfully, and found the courage to hope again. To those who fight battles unseen, who hold on to love even when life feels unbearable, and who cherish the memories that shape us, this is for you. The days after Vera's funeral blurred together, stretching into a hollow emptiness that Darlington could not escape. The house once filled with her laughter and Sonia's giggles now felt unbearably still. Every corner carried her memory. The scent of her perfume lingering in the bedroom, the photographs smiling from the walls, the soft blanket she used to wrap herself in. Darlington wandered through it like a ghost. Food lost its taste, sleep abandoned him. He shut himself away in the dim silence, surviving but not living. His body grew thinner, his eyes sunken, and though Sonia's tiny footsteps echoed through the house, he struggled to turn toward her. It wasn't a rejection of his daughter. It was the crushing reality that every time he looked at her, he saw Vera, and the sight broke him all over again. Leila, Vera's lifelong friend, stepped in quietly, almost without being asked. She moved into the guest house not to replace Vera, but to steady the unraveling threads of the family left behind. She cooked meals Sonia would actually eat, folded Darlington's untouched laundry, and sat with Sonia through long nights when she cried for her mother. Leila did not intrude on Darlington's grief. She was simply there, a constant nurturing presence, a silent anchor in the storm. She would hear him sometimes in the late hours, muffling sobs into his pillow. On those nights she wanted to go to him, to hold him the way Vera might have, but instead she sat by Sonia's bed, whispering comfort to the little girl who clutched her stuffed toy, as though it were her mother's arms. Darlington's breakdowns came in waves. Once in the kitchen, he collapsed against the counter when he reached for Vera's favorite mug, his knees buckling as if the sight alone had struck him down. Leila rushed to his side, catching him before he hit the floor. She didn't speak. There were no words that could fill the void he carried. Instead, she held him while he wept, her quiet strength offering him permission to fall apart without shame. There were moments when Darlington avoided Sonia altogether. One afternoon, she toddled up to him with a crayon drawing clutched in her hand. Her little face lit up with excitement as she called, "Daddy, look!" Darlington froze, staring at the paper but not truly seeing it. His throat tightened, tears burning his eyes. Without a word, he turned away, unable to bear the sight of his daughter's hopeful face. Sonia's smile faltered, and she stood in silence, the drawing trembling in her hands. From across the room, Leila's heart shattered. She went to Sonia, kneeling beside her. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she whispered, hugging the girl tightly. But even as she spoke, her gaze flicked toward Darlington, whose back was turned, shoulders shaking. The quiet tension in that moment was unbearable, the gap between father and daughter carved wider by grief. Leila knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Darlington was drowning, and Sonia was aching for the father who could barely face her. But she refused to give up. She would stand beside them both as Vera would have wanted. In the silence of the house, in the stillness of nights heavy with sorrow, Leila made herself a promise. She would hold this family together, even if it meant carrying both Darlington's grief and Sonia's innocence until he found his way back to them. The months after Vera's passing crawled forward, heavy and unyielding. Spring came and went, yet the house still felt cold. Darlington remained in his shadows, drifting through days like a man half alive. He did the bare minimum. He worked when he had to, had only enough to avoid collapsing, and rarely spoke more than a handful of words to anyone, least of all Sonia. Leila saw everything. She watched the man who had once been vibrant and full of hope sink deeper into the quicksand of grief. She watched Sonia's eyes dim each time her father passed her by without noticing, each time her little hands reached for him, only to be left dangling in empty air. And though Leila carried the burden with patience, nurturing Sonia as though she were her own, her heart could no longer stay silent. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the sky, Leila found Darlington sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. His face was unshaven, his clothes hung loosely on his thinning frame, and his eyes were distant, as though fixed on a world invisible to anyone else. Leila stood in the doorway, her chest tight with the words she had rehearsed but never dared to say. For months she had been gentle, giving him space, letting him grieve. But Vera's absence weighed not only on him but on Sonia too, and the little girl's longing for her Father's love had become unbearable to witness. Darlington's eyes flicked toward her, weary and guarded. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly but her resolve unwavering, and asked what Vera would say if she could see him now. If she could see the way he'd shut himself away, the way he'd turned from Sonia. The words struck like a stone against glass, and Darlington's expression hardened. He warned her to stop, but Leila didn't. She moved closer, her voice shaking with emotion, telling him she had watched him fade day after day, watched Sonia wait for him needing her father, and that he was not there. She asked when was the last time he really looked at Sonia, really saw her, held her, let her feel that she still had her father. Darlington's chest rose sharply, his lips trembling. The words pierced through the armor of silence he had wrapped around himself. He clenched his fists, his breath ragged, until finally the dam broke. His face crumpled and he buried it in his hands, asking why she had left him like this, why she would love him, give him everything, only to leave him in darkness. He admitted he didn't know how to live without her, how to be her husband and go on being anything else, and that every breath without her felt like a betrayal. Leila's tears spilled freely as she knelt before him, placing her hands gently over his, pulling them from his face so she could meet his eyes. She told him she knew his pain because she had lost Vera too, that she was more than his wife. She was her best friend, her sister in every meaningful way, and that she woke every morning wishing to hear her voice, to laugh with her again. She told him they couldn't let grief bury them, that they must mourn Vera together, but also honor her memory by living for Sonia and for themselves. Darlington's sobs grew heavier, and for the first time since Vera's passing, he collapsed into Leila's embrace. They wept together, their grief colliding, intertwining, two broken hearts carrying the same loss. In that moment, the walls he had built cracked under the weight of her truth, and though the pain did not vanish, it was no longer his alone to bear. The days that followed began to change slowly but unmistakably. Leila continued juggling her work and the care of Sonia, pouring her love into every meal cooked, every bedtime story read, every scraped knee kissed. Sonia began to cling to her more and more, her small arms wrapping around Leila's neck as though she were the safest place in the world, and Darlington, though still stumbling, began to re-emerge. He would sit at the dinner table again, even if quietly. He would listen when Sonia babbled about her day, even if his replies were simple. Every so often, Leila would catch him watching, Sonia with a flicker of something fragile in his eyes, something like recognition, something like love. One night, after Sonia had finally drifted off to sleep, Leila sat by her bedside, smoothing her curls and whispering a prayer for her peace. She lingered there, her heart heavy yet full, before slipping out into the hallway. To her surprise, Darlington was there, leaning against the wall, his eyes red but softer than before. He whispered thanks for not giving up on her or on him. Leila's chest tightened, but she simply nodded, her heart aching with the weight of all that remained unspoken. She didn't tell him how exhausted she was from carrying them both, or how deeply she still grieved Vera herself, or how hard it was to live in the space between being Sonia's second mother and never truly being Vera. She only smiled faintly, because what mattered most was that Darlington had finally taken the first step back toward life. The house was still quiet without Vera's laughter, but something was shifting. The cracks in Darlington's world were slowly letting in light again, and Leila knew Vera would be proud. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that healing, however slow and imperfect, might actually be possible. The air inside the house had grown heavier again, though this time it wasn't just grief, it was the quiet suffocation of routine. Leila had been holding the family together for months, balancing her work with Sonia's needs and Darlington's fragile state. She rose early to make Sonia's breakfast, walked her to school, worked late into the evening, and still found time to fold Darlington's shirts when he left them, abandoned in the laundry basket. But every day a small part of her spirit broke. She could not keep pretending that this arrangement could go on forever. Sonia needed her father, not a shadow who passed in and out of rooms, but a man who would show up, look his daughter in the eyes, and remind her that she was still loved. And Darlington, as much as she pitied him, had to make that choice himself. One night, after another dinner where Darlington sat in silence, barely touching his food, Leila's resolve hardened. When Sonia was tucked safely into bed, Leila walked into her guest house and pulled out a suitcase. She laid it flat on the bed, her hands trembling as she began to fold her clothes. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to continue. This wasn't about abandoning them. It was about saving them. When she stepped into Sonia's room, her heart cracked. The little girl was asleep, her tiny fists curled under her chin, her face peaceful for once. Leila bent down and kissed her forehead, whispering softly that she loved her. She began to gather Sonia's clothes, folding them neatly into a small bag. Every shirt, every little sock felt like a betrayal, but she knew Sonia deserved more than watching her father disappear day after day. The sound of zippers and rustling fabric must have carried through the hall, because suddenly Darlington appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wide with confusion, asking what she was doing. She froze, the half-packed bag clutched in her hands. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, telling him she couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep holding his life together while he refused to live it. That Sonia needed him, not her pretending to fill the space he'd left behind. His chest rose sharply, panic flooding his expression as he asked if she was leaving. Leila's eyes filled with tears. Yes, she said, because if she stayed, nothing would change. He would keep hiding in his grief, and Sonia would keep growing up without the father she still had. She loved her too much to let her suffer. Darlington shook his head, stumbling into the room as though the ground beneath him was collapsing, saying she couldn't take Sonia from him. Leila's voice broke. She told him she wasn't taking her from him. She was giving her back to him, that Sonia was his daughter and needed his love. His presence, not just his grief. The words cut through him like knives. For a moment he stood frozen, his face twisted with anguish. Then, with a sudden rush, he crossed the room and grabbed her arm, his voice cracking with desperation, begging her not to go, not to take her, saying he couldn't lose her too. His words stunned her, not because they were romantic, they weren't, but because they revealed the raw fear he carried, the terror of abandonment layered on top of grief. He wasn't ready to confess love, and she wasn't ready to hear it, but in that moment something shifted between them. Leila stared at him, her heart hammering. His eyes, red and wet, begged her to stay. Her hands shook as she dropped the bag, the clothes spilling onto the floor. She whispered that she couldn't do this alone anymore, that he had to try, not for her, for Sonia, for Vera. He nodded, choking on his sobs, promising he would try, just asking her not to go. That night marked the breaking point. The next morning, Darlington sat down at the breakfast table with Sonia for the first time in months. She looked at him uncertainly at first, but when he smiled faintly and asked about her dreams, her eyes lit up. She chattered between bites of cereal, and though his heart still ached with every word, Darlington forced himself to listen. Day by day he began showing up. Small things at first, reading Sonia a bedtime story, helping her with her drawings, sitting with her at dinner instead of retreating to his room. Leila watched silently, her heart swelling and aching at once. Sonia blossomed under his renewed presence, her laughter returning, her little arms wrapping around her father with joy she had almost forgotten. And Darlington, though still scarred, began to notice Leila. At first it was simple, the way she braided Sonia's hair with tender patience, the way she laughed softly when Sonia spilled juice and tried to hide it. But slowly it became more than that. He began to see the woman, not just Vera's best friend, not just Sonia's stand-in mother, but a steady, kind, beautiful soul who had carried him through his darkest nights. He hated himself for it sometimes. Every flicker of warmth he felt for Leila came tangled with guilt. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, whispering apologies to Vera for even daring to feel again. Leila felt the same torment. She would sit by Sonia's bed after tucking her in, her heart heavy with a love she could not voice. She had promised herself never to betray Vera's memory, never to let her feelings for Darlington cross the line. She never spoke of Vera's dying wish, because the thought of it felt like a betrayal of them both. But in the quiet hours of night, when Sonia was asleep and the house was hushed, she thought of Vera. She thought of their childhood, their secrets, their laughter. And sometimes she wondered if Vera were here, would she have wanted this? Would she have wanted Leila to love Darlington and Sonia, enough to give them a new kind of family. Her heart whispered yes, but her guilt screamed no. As weeks turned into months, the tension between them grew. They cooked dinner together sometimes, moving around the kitchen in quiet rhythm. Their hands brushed accidentally as they passed plates. Their eyes lingered a moment too long. Neither spoke of it, but both felt it, the fragile, unspoken bond forming in the cracks of their grief. And through it all, Sonia, in her innocent way, began to stitch them closer without even realizing it. The evening light filtered softly through the kitchen windows, painting the room in warm amber hues. Darlington and Leila moved around the kitchen in quiet synchrony, chopping vegetables and stirring pots. Sonia sat cross-legged on the floor, her crayons scattered across a piece of paper as she drew with unwavering concentration. The sound of her tiny giggles and excited chatter filled the air, a melody that had been missing for far too long. Leila hummed a soft tune while stirring the sauce, glancing down at Sonia with a tender smile. Darlington leaned against the counter, watching the two of them. His chest felt tight, a strange mixture of longing, gratitude, and a warmth he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. He realized how naturally Leila had become a part of their lives, how effortlessly she had taken on the role of caregiver, confidant, and anchor for both him and Sonia. Sonia's little voice called them over, saying, "Mummy, Daddy, come see my drawing." Leila looked down at her daughter, a gentle laugh escaping her lips. Darlington's heart skipped. She had said "Mummy," a word so simple, so innocent, yet so full of meaning. He felt the weight of every unspoken emotion surge inside him. Grief for Vera, gratitude for Leila, love that had been quietly growing for months. Leila smiled softly at Sonia and encouraged her to show them. Darlington's gaze shifted from Sonia to Leila. In that moment, he saw her not just as Vera's best friend, not just as a caretaker. He saw her as the woman he had been too afraid to love. He realized that his feelings were undeniable, deep, and utterly intertwined with the family they had created together. As Sonia held up her drawing, her little arms stretched wide, Darlington's voice broke. He told Leila he needed to say something he should have said a long time ago. Leila's heart thumped, though she didn't move. She had sensed this moment coming, but had been too cautious to force it. Darlington confessed he loved her, that he had tried to fight it, to bury it in the shadow of grief, because he didn't want to betray Vera's memory. But loving her, being with her, seeing her with Sonia was not betrayal. It was honoring Vera, honoring everything she wanted for them. Happiness, love, a family. He wanted to live fully for her, for Sonia, and for them to have this life, this family with her. Tears welled in Leila's eyes, and for a moment, the weight of all the months, the grief, the struggle, the unspoken promise, felt almost too much to bear. Then slowly she stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. She told him she loved him too, had loved him all along, but had been afraid it would feel wrong, like betraying Vera. Now she saw it differently. Vera loved both of them. She would want them to live, to love, to care for Sonia and each other. And she wanted that too, this family. Darlington's eyes glistened with tears, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. They held each other tightly, feeling the years of grief, the months of silence, and the quiet yearning dissolve into a shared warmth. Sonia clapped her hands with excitement and ran to join them, giggling as she wrapped her little arms around both of them. For the first time since Vera had passed, the house was filled not only with the echoes of memory but with the vibrant pulse of life and love. Darlington, Leila, and Sonia, three hearts bound by loss, hope, and devotion, formed a family that was strong, tender, and unbreakable. In the weeks that followed, their days were filled with laughter, learning, and love. Dinner tables became places of conversation and connection. Bedtime routines were shared with joy, and the small moments, reading together, helping with homework, sharing stories about Vera, wove their lives into a seamless tapestry of care and remembrance. Vera's memory remained alive, honored daily in quiet ways. The favorite blanket she had knitted for Sonia draped over the couch, her framed photographs smiling from the walls, stories of her laughter and kindness told to their daughter. But grief no longer dominated their lives. It had become a guiding light, reminding them to cherish each other, to embrace love and to live fully. One evening, Darlington watched Leila helping Sonia braid her hair, a gentle smile gracing both their faces. He realized that love and grief could coexist, that honoring the past didn't mean shutting out the future. And in that realization, his heart finally settled. He kissed Leila softly, whispering thanks for staying, for loving, for helping him live again. Leila rested her head on his shoulder, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. They would live for Vera and love together, and so the family they had longed to rebuild was whole at last. Love, patience, and remembrance became their foundation, guiding them forward. Life had returned to the house in waves of laughter, tenderness, and connection. Sonia thrived in the warmth of two devoted parents, and Darlington and Leila, bound by grief and now love, finally embraced the family Vera had dreamed for them all along. In the soft glow of the living room light, they all knew one thing: love had the power to heal, to endure, and to create beauty even from heartbreak. And with that truth, their new beginning, rich with hope, memory, and joy, had begun. The weeks after, Darlington and Leila's quiet confession seemed to move differently, slower, sweeter, touched with a gentleness that neither of them had known for months. The house that once echoed with silence was now filled with small bursts of laughter, clinking plates, and Sonia's endless chatter. The air was no longer heavy with grief, though Vera's presence lingered in every corner like a soft light. Leila had slipped into the role of mother with such natural grace that it stunned Darlington. Sonia would tug at her hand and call, "Mommy, come play." And though the first time nearly broke Leila into tears, she didn't correct her. She simply gathered the little girl in her arms, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Always, my love." Darlington watched it all. The bedtime stories Leila read with exaggerated voices, the way Sonia's curls bounced as she giggled, the warmth of Leila's hand brushing his. When they sat side by side, on the couch after a long day, something inside him softened, then bloomed. He had thought he would never love again. Yet love, stubborn and patient, had returned. It was Sonia who gave him the courage. One evening, they were sprawled on the living room floor, Sonia coloring in a book, while Leila folded laundry. Darlington leaned back on his elbows, watching them, his chest swelling with something he could no longer keep hidden. Sonia, without lifting her head, said with all the blunt honesty of a child, "Daddy, why don't you marry Mommy? Then we can all be happy forever." Leila froze, her hands stilling on a soft towel. Her eyes darted to Darlington's, wide and startled, her lips parting but no words coming. Darlington's heart thundered. He had been waiting for the right moment, but perhaps there was no perfect time, only the one their daughter had just created. He stood slowly, crossed the room, and knelt in front of Leila. His hands shook as he took hers into his. "Leila," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I never thought my heart could heal. I never thought I could feel love again after Vera. But you've shown me that love doesn't replace, it multiplies. You've been my anchor, Sonia's mother in every way that matters, and the reason I've remembered how to live. I don't want another day to go by without making you my family in every sense of the word." Leila's eyes filled, her tears spilling down as she pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "Darlington," she whispered, her voice breaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box he had been carrying for weeks, unsure of when to use it. Inside was a delicate ring, simple yet radiant. Sonia gasped, clapping her hands together. Darlington's voice cracked as he asked, "Leila, will you marry me?" For a long, suspended moment, she could only stare at him, her heart pounding, Vera's memory flashing through her mind. But then she felt Sonia's little arms wrap around her waist, heard her small voice chirp, "Say yes, Mommy," and she knew this wasn't betrayal. This was love continuing. "Yes," she breathed, then louder, with a sob and a laugh all at once. "Yes, Darlington, yes!" He slipped the ring on her finger and Sonia squealed, jumping up and down before diving into their embrace. Darlington kissed Leila's hand, her tears mingling with his own, and for the first time in so long the room felt complete. Their wedding was simple, just as Vera's had been. A small ceremony in the same church where Vera's funeral had been held, not as a shadow but as a circle completed. Friends from the support group, neighbors who had stood by them, and close family gathered, their eyes misty with joy. Sonia walked down the aisle as flower girl, scattering petals with unrestrained glee, her curls bouncing around her smiling face. When she reached Darlington, she tugged at his pants leg and whispered loudly, "Don't cry, Daddy," he chuckled. though tears already brimmed. Leila walked in on her own, radiant in a simple ivory gown, her curls framing her glowing face. Her steps were steady, her eyes locked on Darlington, who looked at her as though the sun itself had chosen to stand before him. When the vows came, Darlington's voice trembled. "I promise to honor you, to cherish you, and to protect the family we've built together. And I promise to honor Vera, whose love brought us here, by loving you and our children with all that I am." Leila's vow was tearful but resolute. "I never thought I could love again after losing my best friend. But love found me through you, through Sonia. I promise to stand by you, to love you, and to raise our children in a home filled with light, laughter, and the memory of the woman who gave me my first family." The kiss sealed it, gentle but fierce, and when Sonia tugged at their hands and said, "Now we're all one family," the congregation wept openly. The months that followed were marked by simple joys, family dinners filled with laughter, movie nights where Sonia fell asleep on their laps, Darlington stealing kisses from Leila in the kitchen as Sonia groaned, "Oh, not again." They built new traditions, but Vera was never forgotten. On her birthday they lit candles. On quiet nights, Leila told Sonia stories of the best friend who had loved her even before she was born. Darlington often sat silently, his heart swelling with gratitude for the way the two most important women in his life were connected by one name, Vera. One stormy night, Leila's labor pains began. Darlington rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear and joy. Hours passed in a blur of pain, encouragement, and prayers whispered under his breath. Finally, a soft cry filled the room, piercing and beautiful. The nurse placed a tiny baby girl into Leila's arms. Her skin was warm and soft, her eyes blinking against the world. Darlington leaned over, his tears falling freely as he kissed Leila's damp forehead. "She's perfect," he whispered. Leila looked down at the child, then up at him. Her voice was weak but certain. "Her name is Vera." Darlington's breath caught. He gripped her hand tightly, his shoulders shaking as tears spilled. "Leila, thank you. Thank you for keeping her alive with us." Sonia, perched on the edge of the hospital bed, leaned in to peer at her sister. "Hi, baby Vera," she said proudly. "I'm your big sister. Don't worry, I'll share my toys. Sometimes." Laughter filled the room, mingled with tears. As the four of them huddled close, father, mother, and two daughters, bound together by love and by memory. Back home weeks later, the house that had once known so much sorrow now echoed with life. Sonia danced around the living room, while baby Vera slept in her crib, the soft glow of the lamp casting warmth over everything. Darlington sat on the couch with Leila, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. He whispered softly, "I never thought I'd have this again. A family, joy. You've given me more than I ever thought possible." Leila kissed his hand, her eyes shining. "No, Darlington. Vera gave us this. She gave us each other." He looked toward the crib, then at Sonia twirling in circles, and finally at the woman who had walked with him through the fire. His heart swelled. Love hadn't ended with loss. It had grown, transformed, and blossomed into something even greater. They were four now, Darlington, Leila, Sonia, and little Vera. A family stitched together by grief, healed by love, and forever held together by the memory of the woman who had started it all. And in that warm golden evening, with laughter and soft breaths filling the air, Darlington knew he was living not just for himself, but for the legacy of love that would never fade. Thank you for joining us on the final chapter of Vera's story and the continuation of love, healing and family, from grief and heartbreak to hope, romance and the joy of a family of four. Darlington, Leila, Sonia, and baby Vera remind us that love never truly ends. It transforms and grows even in the face of loss. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Vintage Mike Tales for more tear-jerking and heartwarming stories.